Hello, this is Amy from Motif Music Studios on another series of Coffee with Composers. And today I'm honored to be here with collaborative and solo pianist, composer, music theorist, and educator Nicole. It's good to have you here, Nicole.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a real honor, and I can't wait to dive into your repertoire. And what I loved when I first listened to your repertoire is I was like, oh, it's so incredibly beautifully detailed and yet has elements of simplicity that really make it accessible. And I think that's a very hard combination to achieve. And so I love that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was a challenge that I really embraced just because I had students really needing it, and so I just decided to dive in. I think my particular sort of skill set and training kind of lent itself well to that type of repertoire. So uh,
Yeah.
excited that it's resonating with students and teachers as well.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And I love that this series, when I first thought of like, oh, this series that would be a unique opportunity to, first of all, just chat with composers like yourself about your lives and your music. But I also hope it's like this bridge to introduce teachers to the composers and therefore the students as well. So I hope it brings that awareness of the beautiful things that you're doing behind the scenes.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, we'll just dive into the questions here. And your resume is immense, and there's so much we could cover. I was reading up on Wednesday and like, oh wow, you've had such unique experiences as both a musician and as a composer. So I just wanted to briefly cover that you've had a background as a soloist, an outstanding accompanist. I know that's a real strength of yours that has some unique skill sets involved with that. An educational composer, an arranger, and a skilled music educator. And today we'll be focusing more on your work as a composer, but I always love to hear that little bit of background from a composer as in how their music journey started. So, how and when were you introduced to the piano?
Well, when I was a really small child, I mean, I must have been about three or something. I think I got a toy piano as a
Yeah.
gift, and one of those little keyboards that's about this big, and
Yeah.
I'd goof around on it. Uh, but then it wasn't until I was close to six that I actually got enrolled in lessons. I mean, my parents are not musicians, so I don't think they really knew the first place to start in looking for a teacher. Plus, there's physical size issues with the
Yeah.
piano versus other instruments. So, in most cases, you are waiting until a bit later. And
Yeah.
so, I was in sort of the typical weekly lesson arrangement with the neighborhood teacher, and that teacher had moved away. I entered the piano pedagogy laboratory program at
Mhm.
Michigan in fifth grade, which
Wow.
is basically a way for their graduate piano pedagogy students to learn how to teach. And they
Mm.
also run some group studio classes and things, very heavy theory emphasis, really kind of shaped me a lot in
Right.
sort of my predilection toward the historical composition, tonal theory, that kind of thing. Um, it was really, we've kind of noticed this in historical composition land in the Partimento community that there is kind of an epicenter around the University of Michigan and the Detroit area.
Neat.
And I'm not sure it was intentional, but we just sort of discovered this.
Yeah. Oh, I love that your journey led you from so a young-ish age, but I like that you addressed that the piano's a big instrument and students don't always have to start at these really young ages. I know as a teacher you specialize in teaching kind of ten years old and up and know your strengths there. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that about Michigan, that they actually have like a pedagogy center, right? That teachers are being taught how to teach. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so a lot of it is that they have you do sort of weekly lessons with your private teacher, who's often
Mhm.
a graduate student. Sometimes they'll have you study with the professors who run the program. I was studying with the professors on and off, And so you get the resources of the university's piano labs and just the frequent studio recitals because it is a larger program. So they were
Yeah.
able to put on more studio recitals, which is very important. And of course, the name, I think a lot of these kids were for parents who said, "Oh, if my kid has an affiliation with the university, that'll help them get into college."
Right.
Um, and I'm sure that was part of it, but I really did feel at home there. I ended up doing my undergraduate at Michigan, and it's still very much home. I love Ann Arbor,
Yeah.
and my fiance is an Ohio State grad. During
Yeah.
football season, that's a little unfortunate for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's for sure. I love that you addressed the fact that not only did you really start there, but it was a safe place that you could continue your studies there. And I think that speaks lots to a program where you see people being nurtured in what they're doing and able to continue for a long time in that. And I love that you're saying it's kind of an epicenter. It's drawing others who are really well equipped to do the things they want to do in music as well,
Well,
which,
yeah, I was able to discover some new things there. I think almost without realizing it. I
yeah.
got to have the typical college experience, but also get to study basso continuo with Ed Parmentier, who's a legend
Oh,
and
yeah.
just an absolutely hilarious man. I loved working with him so much. I joined his early music choir twice,
Yeah.
and there's just so many great people that I got to work with. So,
Oh,
yeah.
that's really special. I think, and is that one when the next question that led in perfectly, because I was thinking, was there someone that stood out to you as an early encourager of your music journey?
Yeah, it would depend on what you mean by early.
Yeah.
Because when I was 18, I had graduated out of the PPLP, and my teacher in that program connected me with Michelle Cooker, she's been in Ann Arbor, I think, ever since her college days because she did piano and chamber music at Michigan, and she really rebuilt my technique
Mm.
and strongly encouraged my compositional pursuits. And she is just a firecracker in all the best ways.
Oh,
Um, she's not for everyone certainly, but I kind of resonate with that kind of firecracker personality, and it was just an immediate connection, and I knew it was going to be a great relationship. And so she actually has a specialty in instrumental collab, which I didn't
okay.
even, didn't even have collaborative arts on my radar at that point.
Yeah.
But she encouraged me in some composition projects, even though, after college, and I was studying with Dr. Louis Nagel during my time at Michigan. So it was in the summers I would go back to Michelle and then I'd be working with Louis, and he
Mm.
was also very encouraging with various repertoire and composition pursuits. And so, I'd go off to grad school and I'd come home and then study with Michelle, and so we're in touch when we can be. So she is just great, and so I'd say if we bend the definition of early,
Yes.
then she would certainly be one such person.
Oh, I love that. We can bend as much as we like today, which is fabulous. And I love that it sounds like you address that one of the reasons you resonated is Anne was this vibrant, also firecracker, probably probably delivered things in a way that was dynamic, but really like worked for you. And I love that when we find those people in our world, then that's something really special. It doesn't always happen for people.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some people would think of me that way. But
I love that. I think there's space for everyone, and as we get to know our different strengths in a music community even, I love that this leads perfectly to the collections you're creating and your work as a composer and as an instructor, because one of the things that really stood out to me is you really know your niche. You know the type of students that you enjoy teaching, you know the ones that thrive with you as an educator, and I saw that in your composing too. Your compositions often have a specific goal in mind, and then you execute them beautifully. So that was really neat to see in your work.
well, thank you. Yeah, I started seeing this need. I was in grad work in music theory at Indiana,
Yeah.
and so I was kind of doing my thing. I had just kind of started getting into collaborative arts, and that sort of reinforced an emphasis on really solid sight reading development among my students because they're teens and adults. I mean, I
Mhm.
was recruiting a lot of college students in other fields, grad students in other fields. They wanted to take piano, but in graduate work, you only get a certain number of credits
Mhm.
per term. And so they couldn't just sign up for lessons. So
Right.
private lessons tend to be a better fit for them. And all these students expressed a desire to eventually be able to play independently, just whatever they would find and enjoy.
Yeah.
And so I already had that emphasis going, and then just doing more and more freelance collaborative piano just really emphasized the importance of being able to read and cite a range. If that Handel range aria is a little too technical for you right now, but you're in a lesson and you just have to keep going, being able to make that work.
Yeah.
And so I would get a lot of students who maybe came to piano from being former violinists
Mhm.
or, former trumpeters. And so they would have some background and their reading skills would actually be pretty strong, but they needed to develop their chops on the piano.
Yeah.
So, and of course, they would be a little sensitive to pieces that sounded kind of childish or,
Mhm.
like jumping kittens or
Yeah.
like, playing skippy rope at
Yeah.
recess.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that again, you're knowing your niche, you're knowing your clientele, and I think that when I first was introduced to your music, and I know you've got many other pieces that at a wide range of levels, but I first heard about you with your Venturing Beyond collection, and it just had those neat elements of this very mature work, but and beautiful melodies. I love that your notes in this collection, I have them in front of me, and you go through, each piece, like the lament in F sharp minor, people can know that there's the chord voicing in in the right hand, and you're reading those moderately sharp keys of E sharp and B sharp and beginning polyphony. So I love that you have those in which learners can be like, hey, look what I'm doing. And also teachers thinking, hey, I want to introduce students to fresh works by a modern composer that actually have very historical elements to them as well. So that was really, really special. Um,
Yeah, I just wanted to be helpful too. A lot of times, adult students are kind of working on their own.
yeah,
Sometimes they don't even have a teacher. I mean, I encourage every student to have a teacher because obviously there's technical considerations and you want to prevent injury. But the
yeah,
fact is, we will have these adult pianists who are just working on their own for whatever reason. So I wanted to provide them with as much assistance as I could.
hmm
And hopefully it's clear enough that they can sort of start on their way, whether or not they have a teacher weekly or at
yeah.
whatever intervals.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you really touch on something that's actually really big right now is self-study. And again, I talk with that with care because I know for some that is what they can do right now. So I though I'm similar to you, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I love it when people can have some instruction and make sure that they're not getting tension injuries or they're trying repertoire that's way above level and getting frustrated and reaching those points of discouragement." So I think again you've solved a problem in these pieces in that they have accessible elements and yet they sound like the pieces everyone wants to play when they want mature music. So I think that's really lovely.
Well, yeah, that was another goal, so that they could stand up to concert environments,
Mhm.
parties, church services. I know some of them have been played as church service
Yeah.
music. I had now maybe fiance is gonna hear me and say,
Yes.
but he claims the Liebeslied in A as his piece because friends of his got married, and then they asked him to play, and his whole family and sort of
Yeah.
childhood friend group is in this area, and so he played the Liebeslied as part of the wedding prelude, and so now
Yeah.
he claims that as his piece. And I tell my friends and colleagues, well, if you assign that to one of your students, don't tell my fiance because they're pianists. We're so weirdly possessive of our repertoire. Like we get offended when someone plays a piece we're working on.
Yeah. It's so true, and that one's beautiful, and I love that it's, the German word for love song, so that was a perfect kind of prelude piece as well, and you note that in your notes so beautifully.
I
Just a
hope.
Yeah, that's great. He can claim it as his own. We have acknowledged that now publicly. It's your
I mean,
piece.
I try to claim the Waldstein, which I know is I have no right to claim, so I have done it too.
Yeah, I love that. Just a little pause to acknowledge we've got a loyal listener in here. Marcus has been here to some live streams before, and I've put everyone else topsy turvy today because I usually live stream in the morning. But thank you for being here, Marcus. He's a fellow live streamer as well, which is great. So can you tell us? We've already kind of touched on this, but can you tell us from your words what your specific niche is as a teacher and how that shaped your work as a composer?
Absolutely. So my niche in terms of age
Yeah.
is ages 10 and up. Um, this is actually a little bit of an expansion because when I was back at Indiana University and kind of building my studio for the first time, I was really only taking teens and adults.
Hmm.
And that worked out because I would get so many of the college and graduate student pool. And then I did expand into working with somewhat younger kids when I moved here to Cleveland and joined a couple multi teacher studios. Obviously, the pandemic happened and online instruction really sort of took off. And I realized I love teaching online, but it really seems to work better, especially in the more traditional way in which I teach, if the student is at least 10.
Hmm.
The younger kids think they need the more multi-sensory experience, kind of being right there and being in person. And it just happens to work more harmoniously with my teaching style.
Yes.
And I also have some oddball specialties that tend to be more attractive to adults and kind of the online demographic. Not so much the way I would build a studio that's local here in Cleveland. And,
Yeah.
I just love not having the traffic, like people in and out of the house. I
Yeah.
mean, you go in those groups, you see so many stories of little siblings destroying furniture or bathrooms and things like that. And it's just so much more of a liability.
Yeah.
Here, I am just in my little corner, with the piano and no commutes.
Yeah.
And there's just so many things that I love about online teaching, but that did mean, I had to commit to the age range that I do.
Yes.
And so adult learning needs, of course, they can be unique. A lot of pedagogical music
Yes.
does not address those needs. Things like the reading skills really being far ahead of the technical skills.
Yeah.
The need for things that sound mature and things like that. I've also written a few arrangements. This has nothing to do with venturing beyond, but a couple of things where the hands are symmetrical, so the same fingers happening at the same time. Um,
Yes.
Older adults tend to need that. Former string players as well.
Hmm.
So that's another thing. I've had a couple arrangements out there, and then certain adults, they'll want to really target working toward a specific piece. Maybe you need
Yeah.
to make an etude out of something more specific to get them toward that piece because they tend to really know what repertoire they want.
Yeah. With very specific goals. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. So you really have to, they've got more mature musical tastes, even if they're beginner students. So you really have to be writing things that are musically and technically solid.
Yeah.
Now, my partimento galant schema background, everything that I was so grateful to receive from the University of Michigan and also IU.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that because it just set me right up to create this very specific type of pedagogical repertoire.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I'm really pleased that they're resonating with these students. And I'm working on sort of an earlier level collection. That's kind of the same goals, funky keys, older
Yeah.
styles, but
Yeah.
more elementary level.
Yeah, I just saw that today and I'm forgetting the name of that newer collection. What's it called again?
So I'm calling it Opening Doors, I
Perfect.
think. I mean,
Yeah.
unless a better name comes along. So it'll be more like mid to late elementary level
Yeah.
work that is also in the funky keys and also in the older styles. And I'm really noticing that a number of my current adults could actually use some of these. Some students just work. They're just best off kind of immersing themselves in a couple keys at a time for like a month.
Yeah.
All the scales, cadences, arpeggios, exercises, and the repertoire in those keys. And there is just like below the solid intermediate level, there's just really not much in these keys. I mean, you get,
No.
I mean, I can think off the top of my head, there are sets by like Dennis Alexander, Bob Vandal, Melody
Yeah.
Bober. They're all these like comprehensive key collections, but they're all like late intermediate,
Mhm.
which would be fine for me to pull out and sight read at a church gig. But I got students who, maybe Anna Magdalena notebook is about
Yeah.
where they're at.
Yeah.
And so I just really saw a hole in the market and
Yeah.
in what was already out there. It's like, well, I'm going to have to fix that.
Yeah, exactly, and it suits your strengths too, and I think it's, a real gift, and I love too the way your mind works when it approaches repertoire because you're always thinking, like, that preparatory element, and I think that's something that I haven't even thought of as much in my teaching that I'm challenged and inspired to do more of. Like, recently, I was thinking of Chopin, and I was thinking, "Wow, a lot of people are aspiring to play these huge Chopin works, and even some just the nocturnes, like accessible repertoire, except it's not accessible if you skip all the steps to get there. And so I started to like breaking down like, oh, what do you need to be able to do that? Like maybe we're going to experiment with polyrhythm earlier, and maybe we're going to experiment with like more talk about those singing lines and phrases. And I know that you're doing that in these works, but you're also doing that with some Ravel preparatory work. I thought
Yes.
that was neat.
So we're jumping quite a few levels in terms of repertoire from
Yes.
opening doors to this. So vignettes is definitely late intermediate, if not maybe early advanced.
Yeah.
Um, so what was happening was I was teaching my private students at IU, and I got a couple adults who had never touched impressionist music before.
Yeah.
And one of those, she had done RCM, and I think have kind of fallen into the trap that can happen with these exam syllabi where really the only pieces that she had been working on seriously were the 3 exam pieces per year.
Mhm.
So you multiply that by about 10 years and you get a very stunted musical vocabulary. Now, I know a lot of RCM teachers actively work against that. They make sure their
Yeah.
students are playing a ton of music. For whatever reason, just didn't happen in her case. And so we wanted to expand her vocabulary. And she really loved the WC Reverie. And she was already playing a couple of the smaller Beethoven sonatas. She was
Yeah.
technically ready, but I could tell it was a struggle because the vocabulary had not been introduced earlier.
Yeah.
So I did my literature review, as any teacher looking to write
Mhm.
educational music should. See if what you want is already out there. And I noticed there was a lot of pre-WC impressionism out there,
Mhm.
some very nice collections, but really not much that prepared for Ravel. And so I saw an opportunity. And so I started writing a few things. I find Ravel very interesting musically, but I
Yeah.
find him very awkward to play. And I really had not done much Ravel. I think I did, part of the Mother Goose Suite,
Right.
part of the PPLP. You would be paired with a duet partner and do some duet stuff every year. And we did the Mother Goose
Yeah.
Suite.
Yeah.
And so I've done a little bit of that and then kind of forgotten about it. And then really hadn't done any of his music as an undergrad. And so I saw a need for sure. And the pieces were very well received. And so I got to the point of writing 5 of them.
Oh, wow.
And they're actually the subject of a master's thesis in piano pedagogy. And so through that, they're going to be edited and then kind of put out in a complete edition. But for now, they're available
Yeah.
on Musica Now, on the same
Wonderful.
website where the individual pieces in Venturing Beyond can be purchased.
Mhm.
And so, I welcome anyone to come and check them out. I think they're bridging the gap between the late intermediate repertoire and the crazy things Ravel makes you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and I love again, our students are always, giving us inspiration for fresh ideas, right? Like, you saw a student need in front of you and just are like, "Okay, let's do this." And I love that we've got a mixed audience. We'll have piano teachers popping in to see this on the replay, as well as fellow composers. And I think there's a really great tidbit there for newer composers or even ones that are looking to clarify their repertoire niche, and just that aspect of studying. Is it out there? What's a need that I can fill that somebody hasn't expanded on as much? So your collections, I can't wait to hear more of the master's thesis with that pedagogical repertoire too. That's a big project.
Yeah, it's really, once you find the niche, then you have a much better chance of the music selling itself.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Yeah.
I'll see some of this spray and pray advertising, and so the question I always have is, what need is this repertoire filling
Hmm.
that isn't out there? Because we have so many successful pedagogical composers, and many of
Yeah.
them I count as friends.
Yeah.
And so I'm always wondering, okay, what can be produced that is new, that fits a need that isn't there? And I think some composers have really done that very successfully.
Yeah.
And, I hope to be one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, I love that. And I think our audience, whether here live, I love that Marcus was saying he doesn't play the piano, but he loved the idea of that symmetrical aspect. And it's
Mhm.
true. Actually, I noticed a post the other day in a Facebook forum too on that kind of like opposite and mirror image playing. And I love that you've already addressed that in some of your compositions, because some people's brains really do need that early on.
Yeah, it's I had been working on the pieces. I actually don't even remember what the specific student need was. I believe there was one. It's kind of bad that I can't remember it now. And then, I had these two arrangements out, and then someone presented at NCKP about kind of turning nasty passages in the literature into symmetrical etudes to kind of fix your alignment
Mm,
and all of that. And so I said, ding, ding, ding. And
yeah.
so it's a thought that's out there for certain students. It's really helpful. Maybe not for everybody, but
Mhm.
I've found enough success with it.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's tailoring to the needs of the student in front of you, but then also finding your niche as an instructor, which you've done, and now you're really clarifying that really big need in the literature that you have great skills to fill. So I can't wait for teachers to explore more of what you've got out there. I'll have it linked in the comments too, so people can go do some listening. And I think people will be really inspired by your repertoire. One thing I also noticed too is students are very open these days to a variety of styles of music. Like I find in my teaching, and maybe it's the way I'm presenting it too, but I find I used to feel like students were always asking me for the newest pop song or the newest, and now I've just been exploring like what sounds do you really love? And we're finding all these pieces that they never might have thought they loved, and they actually really love it. So I think that yours explore a new layer of musicianship that some students might just be like, I love that, like I want to play it. So I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on the type of student you're recruiting.
Yeah.
I probably don't get so many of those who want to play the latest pop songs because I've intentionally designed my website to show
Yeah.
very clearly what I'm about.
Yeah.
And so I admit I am not trained in pop and jazz and all of that. And
Yeah.
so, I don't want to present myself as something I'm not. So I
Yeah.
very much present myself as a classical person.
Yeah.
And so I think I get those students where that's their goal as well. There are plenty of incredible jazz and pop instructors for those who have that interest. So I think my website and my presence have kind of filtered, who I'm getting into contact with.
Yeah.
But yes, I love seeing a student discover a new to them composer
Yeah.
and then just falling in love.
Yeah.
I
And
just
I
had someone fall in love with Piazzolla.
yeah.
It was someone I got to perform a lot of on my cruise ship gigs.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So, and I think you'll probably become that favorite composer for many that our teachers are, many students our teachers are looking for, because I think it really stands out, and I'm excited for more people to play your music. Now, one thing I loved is you've got this again very classically trained. You're deep in with theory and teaching theory, and tons of like church gigs and accompaniment roles, but you also have this wonderful special interest that's filled with a lot of beauty. So I'd love to hear about your interest as we wrap up in monarch butterflies. And I know I just, yeah, I love it.
So, yeah, when I'm not teaching, church gigging, accompanying, you can usually find me in a milkweed field collecting monarch butterfly eggs and caterpillars to raise safely in the sheltered environment of my living room and then
Yeah.
release. I do the tagging program through Monarch Watch in most years. I'm not sure how active that is in Canada, but it's run through the University of Kansas, and so you get a little stickers that's literally like a license plate
Wow.
number, and it goes on their wing, and then they might find your butterfly in Mexico.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Oh, I've never ever heard of that. So I've got some research to do when we're done because now I'm like super curious.
well, I'm waiting to hear about the tag recoveries for this year. I did have one recovered last year, and a local friend also had one of hers recovered.
Yeah.
So made it all the way from Shaker Heights, Ohio, to one of the sanctuaries in Mexico,
Wow.
and so I'll tag and release
Yeah.
all of those, and you learn how to create healthy rear environments so that you
Yeah.
keep the diseases to a minimum, and then it helps them out because they have really low survival rates outside,
Yeah.
just predators and things like that, lawnmowers. And then if for some reason, if they're unreleasable, have got like a physical disability and it's not a disease, I will keep them.
Yeah.
And so I think we requested the presence of a
Yes.
special guest.
Yeah. Let's meet if she's up to it.
Well, she liked my ring light a little too much earlier while we were testing the setup, but this is Pamina. She is a female, and she is named after the main character of the Magic Flute by Mozart.
Oh my
One of my
goodness.
collaborative piano pursuits is I play a lot of vocal repertoire, so a lot
Yeah.
of Mozart opera, and so Pamina is very much a little princess, just like the
Yeah.
character. So she's very particular about what she likes. So
Yeah.
it's very sassy. Let's see if I can get.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think I'm getting a shadow. I don't know how well you all can
Yeah.
see
Oh,
that.
I can see that. Oh, let's see in the
Yeah,
comments if you
she's.
can see
Oh, now
Pamina.
she's started flapping.
Yeah. Oh, that's
It's a
beautiful.
little bit of an auger, but she is a bit over 6 months old,
Okay.
and because the monarchs that are in the migrating generation will live longer, they develop a little differently. So, but she fell as a chrysalis, and it
Yeah.
messed up her wings slightly, and so we decided she was not releasable.
Yeah.
Uh, but she would probably be somewhere in Texas coming back from Mexico now if she had been releasable. But she's just gotten to hang out and watch a lot of TV and observe a lot of online lessons and rehearsals. And I,
Oh.
I think
Oh,
she got to climb on a flute.
oh
I
wow.
was rehearsing for a Leslie Adams birthday concert. And
Yeah.
so they're cultured little bugs.
Yes, very cultured. Oh, I love that so much. And it was just so special to see that aspect of your life too. And I was thinking my children are really interested in planting a butterfly garden. So I think I've got to do some research on that and see what's helpful and what types of butterflies we have here.
Oh, absolutely. Plant milkweed,
Yeah.
probably showy milkweed for you guys. Although I'm not an expert at all on plants. My grandmother had the gardening gene, and I do not. But milkweed, of course, they need that, and
Yeah.
then the different kinds of flowers that they can feed on, whatever's in your area, and they really appreciate it. And
Oh,
I have a bit of milkweed here in my yard that I've
yeah.
seen eggs on it.
Oh,
So you gotta feed them. I said they're the best pets for Italians because
yeah.
they love being overfed.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, I'm gonna I'll link up some information in the video description too about these peaceful pollinators. And I have to admit, I never really thought of their role as pollinators and contributors to growth and gardening. And so I was really inspired when I was gonna meet with you. I was like, oh, I gotta learn a little bit more about monarchs here. So it was really
Well,
special.
yeah. I mean, I just enjoy seeing their little personalities. I think I'm
Hmm.
helping out the population, and I love the comment asking if they've inspired me to write music.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Oh, good.
A few of the vignettes actually have the butterfly imagery in them because that was a popular source. Nature imagery, in particular, it's a
Yes.
source of the imagery that inspired Debussy and Ravel and these other people who are kind of in that orbit. So you have, and there's a great art song by Ernest Chausson called Papillon, which is
Yeah.
butterflies in French. And so it's a little aside. I was playing for the French diction class at IU one summer term, which was just kind of crazy that it ran because
Yeah.
normally they wouldn't enroll enough, but for some reason French and German ran. They needed a pianist. There I was, and so one of the tenors was working on this song, and so for the final presentation, I brought my pet monarch,
Oh, wow.
and the whole class got to love on him.
Oh.
And then we go to play, and the professor's like, "Now we will be singing the song of his people."
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's gonna make me smile every time I see butterflies. The
Yeah,
song.
it's a great little song. I mean, I don't think that a Frenchman would have known what monarchs look like specifically, but I guess France has enough butterflies.
Yes.
And he was able to create the imagery, so I highly recommend giving it a listen.
Oh, that's a
It was
great.
really, it was so much fun to work on.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And that was a great question, Marcus. I appreciate that. And Marcus, I asked a question a little bit early on too. He was asking if pop songs are easier to play because they're simpler. And that's kind of a multi-layered question, but what do you think, Nicole?
I think rhythmically they can be incredibly difficult, and
Yeah.
it does depend on the arrangement, because pop is not really designed in a way that matches how Western notation is designed, because
Yeah.
Western notation was designed for a different tradition. So a lot of pop music has incredibly intricate rhythms that just look like a mess on the page. So I give that fair warning to my
Yeah.
students, if they have an interest in playing pop music. And, a lot of these teachers who are pop specialists, maybe they're teaching a little more by ear if that works for the student.
Yeah.
Um, but I always found it a certain musical theater and pop music, if it would come across my music rack when I was playing for a singer, I'd really have to sit there and kind of put the beat lines in and work out the rhythms because they don't come naturally to me.
Yeah.
Um, my musical language, I think if I could write anything I wanted all the time, it would definitely be early 19th century, kind of the bel canto
Yeah.
opera tradition. Um,
Beautiful.
but some of these rhythms in pop are incredibly complex.
Yeah, I love that you touch on that. And I know when I spoke to Brock Chart, he mentioned that as well. As a composer, we sometimes just pass off pop music as being easier. But like you say, the rhythmic element and some of the choreography needed with your hands when you're doing lots of syncopation and lots of nuance that often isn't translated well onto the score. So it can be, especially if you're not just singing along and chording or something like that. So great question, Marcus. Um, so I was just thinking, lastly, I know you heard recently, that's maybe a broad term, of your inclusion in a collection called 22 Nocturnes for Chopin. Can you tell us a tiny bit about that?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I got to throw a shameless plug to Elena Cobb for getting this project out there. So, she runs EVC Music, it's a publishing firm. They publish a lot of music, for the British market, and like Tales of a Musical Journey. A lot of that music from EVC is also used a lot in the Tales curricula. And so I've known Elena online, through these groups for years. And so she had this call, said, I'm working with this pianist who is putting together an anthology by women composers of pieces inspired by Chopin's nocturnes. And I just happened to have a little phrase that was kind of Chopin-like in character that was just sitting in my unfinished folder for like 10 years. And I said, okay, it's a time to shine. And then they wanted it a little more advanced than Venturing Beyond. And then, there's once it's in the book, then they were going to have the publishing rights, which is very typical. So it was, I decided that the opportunity was there to write something new, and that would be the best option. So I kind of took a gamble, but I also wanted to treat it as a project for myself to turn portamento and schema training into something that was more Chopin-like in style, which I had not really done. I mean, maybe if I have to compare myself to any composers for that period, I tend to write more like a Bellini or a Donizetti.
Yeah.
And Chopin, I think, is a very unique voice, but I embraced the challenge, and the piece was chosen. And so it's about a grade 8 ABRSM standard. So it's like early advanced, maybe very late intermediate.
Yeah.
It is in G sharp minor, so I'm
Ooh.
sticking with the funky keys.
I'll be cursing you later. No, just kidding.
I mean, you get maybe that prepares these kids for Campanella.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so I'm very excited to see the rest of the project. You can go on their website, and there are recorded samples of each piece. You know, a lot of
Oh,
them I think are computerized mock-ups. Some of the composers have recorded them, and I mean, there's just a great variety of styles in there. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of them. There should be a book launch in June,
oh, neat.
and so I'm very excited for that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll be excited to follow that too. And I love again that accessibility of having some of those works that are a tribute to a specific composer and then pulling elements of that. And I actually love that you explore a variety of keys because I was thinking also of students. I've taught a fair number in my teaching career that have a real attachment to specific keys. They may have perfect pitch, things like that. And so I love that you've got so much variety in keys that people don't always think to compose in because they might seem less accessible, and yet some of them actually fit really well under the fingers. So I think that's really another great
Yeah,
aspect.
I teach the B major scale first,
Yeah.
which I got from Michelle. She started with B major when she had quite a job in front of her to rehabilitate my technique,
Yeah.
and she had expressed that came indirectly from Chopin and was sort of handed down through all these piano pedagogy family trees.
Yeah.
And so my students are often very surprised when I have them do B major first, but then they're very impressed at how well it fits in the hands.
Yeah, it really does. Actually, this was my first year. I'm late to the party, but it was my first year also introducing. I did a scale challenge starting in January. And of course, in past I had a lot more exam students, but this year I don't really have so many exam students. So it was just to like level up our technique. And I started everyone, no matter what level, we started the new year with B major. And it was actually super successful and fun. And I thought it really gave a lot of confidence moving through keys, starting with some of those more unusual ones. So that was really cool. And it's not even that unusual, but it fits great under the hands. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's just nothing at the elementary level in these keys that I've been able to find, and I like to think I'm familiar with a good amount of the pedagogical repertoire
yeah.
at this point. But I was looking around and just not seeing nearly what I thought there should be. I mean, sometimes you can find D major and G minor if you look hard, but
Mhm.
I'm students really need more than just a couple pieces or the little minuets from the Anna Magdalena notebook.
Yeah. Absolutely, because when you get to this higher level repertoire, and not only are you navigating the technical challenges of these bigger works, but you're also going, oh my goodness, I've never had to see a B sharp or an E sharp in my repertoire before, things like that, that can really throw a student sideways. So I think this is a great conversation for what we can do to equip students to play the music that they're hoping to play. So I think that's great. Marcus just mentioned, he said, I know that niching down is important for YouTube. Is it similar for composers? And I think that we're discovering today that although composers they don't want to. I think the nature of being a creative, Nicole, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is sometimes we need the liberty to do what moves you in that time. And sometimes if it's like a specific niche, you might feel kind of bound by that. But at the same point, I think there can be some beauty in that because you have a certain style. And then someone like me, I notice now I'm starting to go, oh, well, if you're looking for music like this, chat with this composer because I know that that's their style and the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always thinking of other pedagogical composers who have certain styles that will really resonate for certain students, like Bob Vandal and like the boys who want
Yeah.
that fast, kind of action-packed music.
Yeah.
I had a girl really connect with like some of Jennifer Eklund's music,
Yeah.
and so I always have these certain composers in mind for certain things. So I think it's really helpful if you have a thing you're known for, and you're not kind of stretching yourself too thin trying to do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And there's still so much variety because, like we mentioned today, you've got these collections that are like exploration based in early levels. You've got venturing beyond into those early intermediate or late elementary. I don't know how you class them. I'm forgetting.
I
Um,
would say early intermediate, and
yeah.
then I think some people were kind of getting into the thornier keys and saying maybe mid intermediate, but it's
Yeah.
approximately in there. You know, I tend to be a little less systematic about leveling very specifically within the series just because adults are so hard to level up.
Yeah.
It's because they tend to have uneven skill sets.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's sometimes really hard to just say this will suit if you're at this level. I think a lot of it is the experience of a teacher looking at it and going, "Hey, this is going to be perfect for the skills that we're developing right now." And I kind of like that it had a bit of a broader level even within the collection because then you can it really maximizes as a teacher. I feel like I could use it in so many different ways for so many different students, whether they need a sight reading piece, whether they need a skill based piece at an earlier level or at a later level. So I thought it was great that way. So this has been a really special conversation, Nicole. Thank you for joining me today. And I've just really loved chatting with you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's absolutely my pleasure. I've enjoyed the series that you've been creating, and always it's great to connect with colleagues
Yeah.
who are sharing some of the same visions.
Yeah.
And I love that you're bringing some contemporary music out there.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's such an honor. And thank you to our audience today, whether you're here live. Thank you, Marcus. You've been here all along. Fun to see your comments. And I watched a live stream of Marcus's this morning with a astronomer. So that was really cool, too. So thank you again. Let us know in the comments if you're here on the replay. And thank you, Nicole. I hope you have a restful remainder of your day. And I really appreciate your time here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll see you behind the scenes. Bye bye.
Yeah.